Good morning, my name is Victoria Ortiz, and I will be teaching an English 3 class predominantly made up of sophomores and juniors. And I will be teaching literary devices in poetry. So the objective for this week will be to focus on identifying literary devices and how they benefit poetry. Literary devices can always make or break literary texts, whether it be poetry, short stories, anything like that. So with literary devices, they can put emphasis on emotion, they can put emphasis on like the scenario that's going on. It can basically create one scenario and add more suspense, or it can add more emotion to a character. It can pretty much change the whole way in which you wanted like your short story or poem to go. So with that being said, let's go ahead and continue with this week's theme. So of course we have a theme every week, and for this week, our theme will be feminism. I wanted to go ahead and do feminism as there have been a lot of feminist topics going on in the news, and which I'm pretty sure most of you have looked at. If you have any questions about maybe any of them, you can always contact me in my email, which I'll go ahead and give you again at the end of the presentation. So for that being said, let's go ahead and look at the poem we will be working on together as a class. So I went ahead and chose this poem because it's a great example of how feminism has been represented in poetry. I Sit and Sew is basically a good example of how women were forced to be more subordinate to their husbands, to society, and overall just, not being able to be their free selves. So with that being said, let's go ahead and read I Sit and Sew by Alice Moore Dunbar Nelson. I sit and sew. I sit and sew, a useless task it seems. My hands grown tired, my hand weighted down with dreams. The panoply of war, the marital tread of men, grim-faced, stern-eyed, gazing beyond the ken of lesser souls whose eyes have not seen death, nor learned to hold their lives but as a breath. But I must sit and sew. I sit and sew, my heart aches with desire, that pageant terrible, that fiercely pouring fire, on wasted fields and writhing grotesque things, once men, my soul in pity flings, appealing cries, yearning only to go, there in that holocaust of hell, those fields of woe. But I must sit and sew. The little useless seam, the idle patch, why dream I here beneath my homely thatch? When there thy lie in sodden mud and rain, pitifully calling me the quick ones, and they slain? You need me, Christ. It is no Resian dream that beckons me, this pretty futile scene. It stifles me. God, must I sit and sew? So let's go ahead and take a look at some of the literary devices that we are not so much familiar with, but we'll go ahead and look at it. So I wanted to go ahead and use metaphor in here and identify a metaphor that I saw. This metaphor is very simple. It's going to be just the repetition of I sit and sew. Now, a metaphor is a figure of speech in which a word or phrase is applied to an object or action to which it is not literally applicable. So in this case, I sit and sew is more talking about the emphasis of why the woman is sitting and sewing. She's not allowed to go and participate in the war. She's not allowed to leave her home without her husband's permission. She's not allowed to do anything without her husband's permission, or society's permission for that matter. Women were confined to the home and they had to take care of, the children, the family in general, the household, everything. That was their job. So for the repetition of I sit and sew, you can also consider it a repetition. It puts emphasis on how much the woman is confined and how much she wishes to be free and actually experience different things. I know a metaphor is normally something that you would identify in poems or any literary text anyway. However, in this case, I wanted to show this because most of the time students think metaphors are supposed to be these like wild quotes. No, it can actually be very simple. So much so as I sit and sew like in this poem. So if you do have any other questions about metaphors, or if you would like to identify maybe even a couple more metaphors that you noticed in this poem, please feel free to email me and we can make a list of different stuff or a list of different quotes that we can throw into next week's presentation, and we can talk about them as a class. Now, symbolism. So in this case, symbolism is the use of symbols or to represent ideas or qualities. In this case, the quote, "I sit and sew, a useless task it seems, my hands grown tired, my head weighted down with dreams." So in this case, the woman is describing her endless work with sitting and sewing, and is also defining how the standards were for women. Like I said before, like they weren't allowed to do anything without permission. They had to cater to their husbands and families. And by her sitting and answering, she has no choice but to be subordinate to her husband and society and whatever they want from her. She's not able to go and do the things she wished she could like her whole life. If she wished she wanted an education, sometimes that wasn't offered. If she wished, she had like a boutique of her own, most of the time that couldn't happen. So for her, it was, difficult to accept those things. And that's why she put so much emphasis on how just sitting there and sewing is actually something that she has control over. She's in control of the patchwork. She's in control of the thread and the color of it. She's in control of the whole process. So moving on to our next one, paradox. So a paradox is a seemingly absurd or self-contradictory statement or proposition that, when investigated or explained, may prove to be well-founded or true. So in this case, when she says, "You need me, Christ," the paradox is putting an emphasis on how women are important in society and men need them too. During this time, a lot of the times, men just thought, women were not that valuable to them as far as, other than just being married and having wives and stuff. But for women, they're like, no, like, you don't understand. They're telling men and they're telling society, you don't understand. You cannot function without us. We are the ones who birth children. We are the ones who do things for men. We are the ones who do things for our communities. We're the ones who step up when the tough gets going at home. And we're the ones that take care of everything while men are at war and men are at work. So the fact that, she is telling this ultimate, religious being, which is, Christ, Jesus Christ, that he needs her help, is a wonderful representation of how women are needed 100% in society. Because without them, they would, society just wouldn't function, and everything else just wouldn't function as far as socially. So our last literary device we're going to be looking at is personification. Now, this one was rather interesting because it's a simple word, but yet it changed so much by making a simple change. And in this case, personification. Personification is the attribution of a personal nature or human characteristics to something non-human, or the representation of an abstract quality in human form. So it's like giving a personality to objects. So a home, or even a fireplace. Sometimes it's even giving a personality to a body part, like a finger or toe or anything like that. In this case, death was seen as like a second person in this poem. So the minor change that was made in this poem was capitalizing the D in death. And what that did was gave death its own persona, because therefore, if you had put, or if the writer had put death with a regular D, a lowercase d, it would have then just been part of the sentence. However, since it was capitalized, it therefore gave a persona, because you don't put a lowercase in the front of your name, you capitalize it. So it gave death a name and gave it a personality. And so when she says in the poem, like she's about, like when she starts talking about death, she's talking about it as if she's talking to another person, another character, so to say. So in this case, the speaker can physically see and speak to death, whereas most of the time we would just consider death like a concept. All right, so like I said before, the purpose of these literary devices, allows the readers to, or allows y'all to analyze the text. I'm sure there was a lot of different literary devices that you weren't sure about as far as like the different ones I went over. I wanted to go over some different ones such as paradox and personification that's not normally used a lot or identified a lot, and present it to y'all so y'all can see that there are little literary devices that can lie within the text and we can completely pass by it. So like I said, by using literary devices, it allows you to analyze the text, which is what exactly we did today. It allows you to identify deeper meanings in the text, just like how we identified the personification in the word death. And it can just elevate your poem overall. So as we saw, like in this poem, it generally just spoke about sitting and sewing. However, because of the metaphor being used to identify in that line where she says, I sit and sew, it elevated the poem to have such a deeper meaning. And we therefore analyzed that and identified it. And because we did, it therefore gives a higher meaning to the words that we read. So we're gonna go ahead and start our assignment for the week. It's going to be one of the poems that you can choose from the feminismpoetryfoundation.org collection. I want y'all to go ahead and use one poem, either from the first wave, the second wave, and identify at least 5 different literary devices. You can do this in any format. Just make sure that you have your 5 clearly pointed out. You can number it, bullet point it, whichever, and also include an explanation as to how it benefits the poem. Absolutely 100% do not use imagery when identifying literary devices. Imagery is a very easy literary device to point out, and it's commonly used. So let's go ahead and not focus on that and try and focus on other literary devices that may be a little more challenging for us. This is due by Friday by 11:59 p.m. And if you have any questions about it, you are more than welcome to submit an email to me to the email that's listed. So that'll be it for today. And like I said, if you have any questions, please email me with the email I provided. And that's it. Everybody have a great day.